Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radha Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Gaunitai Jaya Gaunitai Jaya Gaunitai Jaya Gaunitai Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajakacarya Shtatra Shata Sri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Ramacharya Lalidas Thakur Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा गिरिधारी भगवान की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मैया की जय श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Gurudev. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Yuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Hare Krishna and welcome to our session of Krishna Katha in the evening, where we are discussing the lessons that we can learn from the pastime of Krishna's appearance in this material world. So we'll look at a verse today from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is from chapter 2, text 24. Asina samvisham stishthan bhunjana paryatan mahin chintayano rishikesham apashyattanmayam jagat. Asina samvisham stishthan Bhunjana paryatan mahim Chintayano Rishikesham Apashyattanmayam Jagat. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. While sitting on his throne or in his sitting room, while lying on his bed, or indeed while situated anywhere, and while eating, sleeping, or walking, Kamsa saw only his enemy, the Supreme Lord Rishikesha. In other words, by thinking of his all-pervading enemy, Kamsa became unfavorably Krishna conscious. It's a long purport, but I'll just read some of the important points here. So it is Prabhupada here basically talks about the first thing he mentions is a verse from Rupa Goswami from the Nectar of Devotion, where he says that the actual process of Krishna consciousness is favorable devotional service. So although in the translation it says that he was unfavorably Krishna conscious, so somebody might say it's Krishna conscious anyway, so whether it's favorable or not, does it matter? So Prabhupada clarifies in the first part of the purport that Rupa Goswami has described the finest pattern of devotional service as anukulyena krishnanu shilanam. So anukul, or cultivating Krishna consciousness favorably. So Kamsa, of course, was also Krishna conscious, but because he regarded Krishna as his enemy, even though he was fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, his Krishna consciousness was not favorable for his existence. So Krishna consciousness favorably executed or cultivated makes one completely happy. So much so that a Krishna conscious person does not consider Kaivalya Sukham, or merging into the existence of Krishna, to be a great gain. Further, Prabhupada writes that for a Krishna conscious person who is cultivating Krishna consciousness favorably, the happiness conceived by the karmis, jnanis and yogis is treated as less than a fig. Kamsa, however, because of cultivating Krishna consciousness in a different way, that is, inimically, was uncomfortable in all the affairs of his life. So he was thinking about Krishna in an unfavorable way, so he was not happy and joyful. But when we think about Krishna in a favorable way, then we experience the joy being connected to Krishna. So Prabhupada writes that this is the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. A non-devotee or atheist also cultivates God consciousness, but trying to avoid God in everything. If one can understand the position of the living entity as a separate portion of the Supreme Lord, by studying the nature of the living entity, one can understand the nature of the Supreme Lord. Since the living entity is a fragmental sample of Godhead. But because atheists are not interested in God consciousness, they try to be happy by cultivating Krishna consciousness in various unfavorable ways. For a non-devotee, the world is full of problems, whereas for a devotee, the entire world is full of happiness. And this is one measure for us to kind of take stock and see, are we moving towards becoming a devotee or not? And so if we are experiencing joy in the devotional service that we do or that we undertake, then we should understand that we are getting the mercy of Krishna, the Acharyas and Guru. There's a verse Prabhupada quotes from Chaitanya Chandramrita. Vishwam Purna Sukhayate Vidhi Mahendra Discha Kita कीटयते यत् karunya kataksha vaibhavatam tam gauram eva stumaha. This comfortable position of a devotee can be established by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. Even when a devotee is superficially put into great difficulty, he is never disturbed. And that is the difference we see between Vasudev in the prison and Kamsa, who was the king who put Vasudev in the prison. So the comparative analysis between the conditions they were going through and their respective consciousness gives us an idea of this particular statement or point that Prabhupada is trying to make in his purport. So last time we had concluded at the point where Kamsa, when Vasudev brought the first-born child of Devaki and handed over to Kamsa, he was extremely touched, and he knew that Vasudev is true to his word. And when he saw Vasudev actually keeping his word, by dint of associating with extremely wonderful personality like Vasudev, Kamsa also imbibed some of his qualities. So the goodness of Vasudev also somehow rubbed off on Kamsa. And he thought that the danger is from the 8th child, not the first child. So why should I unnecessarily harm or kill this child? So he gave this child away to Vasudev. And Vasudev went away and mentioned all this to Devaki. And Devaki was happy, but Vasudev in his mind somehow, he was not 100% sure that Kamsa would just pardon the child and just stay quiet, because he knows that demons can never be trusted, or the words of a demon can never be trusted. And then we had this another wonderful personality who came to Kamsa to stir a few things. So Narad Muni, he came and he met Kamsa, and he asked how things are, after exchanging the pleasantries that usually happen when somebody meets one another. And Narad Muni basically told Kamsa that, do you know that there has been a grand plan, and all the devatas are kind of taking birth in the family of Yadus, and obviously the person who's going to kill you will also be born soon. And by the way, Vishnu, who is going to take birth soon, had killed you in your previous birth when you were a demon called Kalanemi. And so he, after having that conversation, he said that who knows which one is the first child and which one is the 8th child. And he took a lotus petal which had got 8 petals, and then he just looked at the petals and said, can you decide which one is the first and which one is the 8th? And he threw that flower at Kamsa, and Kamsa took that, or held on to that, and looked at it, and he was perplexed. That's right. How do you know which one is the first, which one is the 8th? Based on this, it's like a cyclic thing. So he was extremely perplexed. He just didn't know what to do. But at the end of the day, he knew that if that 8th child is born, he's going to get killed. So out of fear, he thought, well, it is extremely foolish to let this child go. He doesn't want to take any chances whatsoever. So as soon as that thought dawned on him, as Narad Muni left, he called his guards and immediately arrested Devaki and Vasudev and put them in the prison. And as soon as he got them into prison, he pulled the child from them and obviously banged the child on the wall. Blood stains all over. And just looking at that whole scene, Vasudev and Devaki, they just mumbled to each other, and they could barely keep their consciousness. They just fainted. And we saw how Ugrasen, when he understood that his own son Kamsa had actually imprisoned Vasudeva and Devaki against his wishes, he demanded that Kamsa be arrested. And when the guards of Ugrasen went to Kamsa to arrest Kamsa, Kamsa also he had sensed that this is going to happen one day. So he had also prepared his own royal troops. So the troops kind of started fighting each other. Kamsa, it is said that he single-handedly killed the guards that came to arrest him. Not only that, he went towards the palace or the chambers of Maharaj Ugrasen, and he killed all his private guards single-handedly. He was extremely powerful. Sometimes when we hear that Krishna had killed Kamsa just with his fist, sometimes we tend to feel that maybe Kamsa was not all that powerful. Krishna didn't have to, use any weapons or fight for a long time and kill Kamsa. So we feel maybe the opposition was not as strong as Krishna. But actually, if we see from the references, all the demons that Kamsa dispatched, which we saw last time, all the demons that Kamsa dispatched to kill Krishna were demons that Kamsa had personally defeated. And being defeated by Kamsa, they agreed to serve him. So Kamsa had defeated all of these demons. He was much more powerful than all these demons put together. And these instances of how he fought single-handedly with an army and killed all of them is another testimony to Kamsa's immeasurable strength. So he went towards the palace, killed all the guards, and then finally he caught hold of Ugrasen, his own father, by his neck, dragged him from the throne, and bound him with the ropes, put him in the prison. And then he declared himself as a self-proclaimed king of Mathura. So as soon as news spread far and wide, no WhatsApp, but somehow the news goes through the air. So as soon as the news spread, all the kings, all the different territories or different dynasties like Yadavas, Andakas, Vrishnis, Madhus, they understood that now that Kamsa is the king and he's taken charge, we have to face a lot of atrocities from him. So fearing that, they also left the place and they ran away. And they went to far off places and settled as cowherds or farmers. They knew that this was a moment where time was actually favoring Kamsa. And instead of acting against providence, against destiny, they should just survive and keep a low profile and wait for the inevitable to happen, for the Supreme Lord to appear and relieve them of this atrocities. And they knew that there was this prophecy already made. Anyway, so when all this was going on, Devaki and Vasudeva were obviously in the prison. And subsequently, after the first child was killed, Devaki had another child. And in the same way, Vasudeva took that child, gave it to Kamsa, or Kamsa actually came and took hold of the child. As soon as his guards reported that a child was born to Devaki, immediately Kamsa came into the prison cell, took the baby, snatched the baby, and again crushed it against the wall. So like that, he did it the second time, he did it the third time, he did it the fourth time, he did it the fifth time, he did it the sixth time. So you can imagine the whole prison wall or cell was just full of blood. And Devaki and Vasudeva, you can imagine, completely lost their mental equilibrium looking at all this and going through all this. So they said that the whole prison was splattered with blood. But somehow or the other, Devaki and Vasudeva, they had firm faith in the Supreme Lord and they believed in the prophecy. And so, in spite of going through all of this, they did not lose hope. And that is a great lesson for us from this episode, is that we should not lose hope. in whatever circumstances we go through. It's very easy to say, but by taking inspiration from Vasudeva and Devaki, we have to understand that we should never lose hope. And for something good to happen, something perfect to come into our lives, we have to undergo a certain amount of pain. It is inevitable. So that's a lesson that we can get from this episode. Another lesson which I thought I don't know whether I spoke of in detail last time, but is the fact that Narad Muni went to Kamsa, and people say that he actually incited Kamsa to act demoniacally, although he had forgiven the child and told Vasudeva to take the child. Because Narad Muni went, Kamsa killed all the children. If Narad Muni wouldn't have gone, then maybe he wouldn't have killed. So people have this question in mind, or sometimes they are a bit argumentative on this fact that Narad Muni is just there to incite people. But they forget that Narad Muni is a pure devotee of the Lord. And his only business is to facilitate the Lord's activities and follow the desire and will of the Lord. And he knew that the Lord was eager to advent. So when a person like Narad Muni, a pure devotee, goes to somebody's house, all that they are concerned, or all that is there in their mind, is the benefit of the person at whose place they have actually gone. So just like we have pure devotees coming to our house and stepping and making our house into a worshipable place just by their presence. Similarly, when Narad Muni went to Kamsa's house, he actually blessed him. And when the exalted devotees arrive at somebody's house, they say things that are for the benefit. Of course, keeping in mind the Lord's, they're always thinking about the Lord, they're always carrying the Lord in their heart. But when they say something, especially to the host, it is for the benefit of the host. So when Narad Muni said these statements, or gave the example of that lotus flower to Kamsa, why did he do so? Well, he was speaking that for the benefit of Kamsa. Why? Because if Kamsa commits more atrocities, commits more cruel activities, the Lord would appear faster. And the faster the Lord appears, the faster Kamsa would get the Lord's mercy on behalf of the Lord killing him. So if Krishna appears in somebody's life faster than what was destined or what was supposed to happen, is that good or bad? That's good, right? So Narad Muni actually was thinking about Kamsa's benefit when he gave him this thought, or put this thought in his mind. And anyway, he knew the 6 children had to live a very short life in this material world and go back. So he knew the overall picture. He was not concerned with the body being killed, but he was more concerned about the soul being freed from that entanglement that they were destined to suffer by taking birth in this material world. So he did it for the benefit of not only Kamsa, but also those 6 souls that had to go through this process. So one thing we have to remember, a pure devotee always thinks about the benefit of others, especially people who he is meeting. And because he is connected to the Supreme Lord through the dint of devotional service, pure devotional service, whatever they do is exactly as per the will of the Lord. Then, finally, after all these pregnancies were destroyed by Kamsa, Devaki had her 7th pregnancy, the 7th child. And somehow or the other, there was a bit of a confusion when this pregnancy happened. So when Devaki was pregnant, the nurses who were watching out Devaki's pregnancy, they confirmed that she's pregnant. But after some time, after a few months, when they perhaps came for some general checkup, they suddenly realized or saw that there's no baby in the womb. It's almost that she's lost the baby. And, they kind of just thought that maybe it's a possible miscarriage. But how can it just happen just like that? So they reported back to Kamsa. And Kamsa, on one way, thought, well, if it's a miscarriage, I don't have to kill the baby. But he was also confused. Why was he confused? So this child died on its own. So should this child be considered as the seventh child who died before Kamsa could kill? Or because the child died before Kamsa killed him, should this not be taken as a count? So whether he should count this child as the seventh child or just say, no, this is 0. So now there's going to be another child which is 7 and then 8. Sometimes when we are very perplexed and we are very fearful, even logical things we are not able to make, understand very clearly in our mind, and we become perplexed. So Kamsa at this point was completely perplexed. And the citizens thought, when this miscarriage happened, that maybe Kamsa has somehow or the other dubiously destroyed the embryo before even the child is born. So it's all Kamsa's doing. He didn't want to take the effort of killing the child after it was born. So he killed the child in the womb itself. That was the perception of the citizens. Anyway, so when Devaki was actually pregnant with the seventh child, Rohini, who happens to be another of Vasudev's wife, was also pregnant at the same time. And when Vasudev was imprisoned, he carefully told Rohini or sent Rohini to Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda's place so that she could stay with them and be safe when Vasudev is in prison. So when Rohini was there, she had a dream at night. And in the dream, she saw that she has a miscarriage. And there was a divine personality who said that, yes, you did have a miscarriage, but another wonderful divine personality is going to take birth from you. And he will be known as Sankarshan because he will be attracted like a magnet into your womb. So when she heard this, she could feel a very soothing presence. So when she heard of the termination, she was very fearful and anxious. But when she heard this voice, she became very peaceful. And it is said for the next 14 months, she had the child in her womb, and then she eventually gave birth, just a week before Krishna took birth. And obviously the personality was extraordinary looking, extremely beautiful. When he appeared, charity was given, and all the citizens were extremely joyful, and they were celebrating the birth of this child. And then, in the prison cell, Vasudev started experiencing or having a feeling that there are different divine personalities in the prison cell. He could feel their presence. And somehow or the other, he could feel a divine presence in his heart. And when he had this divine presence, or he had that feeling, he just shone so brightly. He became extremely effulgent. It was very evident. And from the heart of Vasudev, this effulgence was transferred to the heart of Devaki. And she was glowing like anything. It is mentioned in Bhagavatam that the whole prison cell was illuminated by Devaki's presence. Just wherever Devaki went, it was illuminated. And when the guards saw this, they were, maybe this is the time. So they immediately went and informed Kamsa that Devaki is looking extraordinarily effulgent. Please come and have a look. And when Kamsa heard this, he knew it's time. His time is up. And from that point onwards, it is said that fear, it left Devaki's heart and it entered into Kamsa's heart. Of course, Devaki was fearless even before, but whatever little bit was still there, it completely was removed from Devki's heart and it entered Kamsa's heart. So Kamsa at this point became extremely fearful. Anyway, since he heard this news, he rushed to see Devki, and when he saw her in the prison cell, he was amazed. She had this wonderful effulgence and she had this mystical smile, completely fearless. Completely fearless. And just looking at her smile and her, her consciousness, he just couldn't comprehend. What's going on? How can somebody be so fearless and so peaceful in a prison cell? And then he thought, well, it must be because his killer is already in the womb, and this is a good time to kill her. But then he thought, if I kill her now, anyway, my citizens don't like me. I have become the killer king by force. If I kill her now, apart from the sin of killing my sister, and that too a pregnant sister, my whole image as a Kshatriya will be completely tarnished. And so I'll lose reputation in this life. And if I commit such a grievous activity in this life, my next life also will be doomed. So thinking like that, he refrained from taking any action against Devki at that point of time. So he just left her there, went back to his palace, but he was constantly thinking about Krishna. He was constantly thinking about the Devki's child and how this child is going to be born, how this child is going to be killed. He was constantly thinking, constantly fearful. And since he was constantly thinking about Krishna, he entered a state of complete absorption, which also is technically called Samadhi. And then 8 months later, when the time came for Krishna to appear, Brahma and so many other devatas, the demigods, they came to this prison house and they offered their obeisances, offered wonderful prayers in glorification of the Supreme Lord, and they considered it their duty to at least express gratitude because it was on their request that Krishna was appearing in this material world to relieve the earth of its burden. So after their prayers, suddenly there was this whole experience of auspiciousness. Everything in this, around the whole atmosphere became very auspicious. It is said that the birds, they started chirping perfectly. The stars started shining very, very brightly. All the oceans, the rivulets, the lakes, it was full of water. All the flowers were blooming so wonderfully. The breeze was carrying beautiful fragrance right across. And all the living entities, all the living beings there were actually initially fearful of Kamsa and his atrocities. But at that point of time, when all these auspicious signs were manifesting, they experienced a feeling of fearlessness, a feeling of joy, a feeling of contentment in their heart. So this also shows or indicates that whenever we connect ourselves with Krishna, whenever we take certain steps and engage in devotional service of the Lord, we by default connect ourselves to Krishna. And because we connect ourselves to Krishna, he obviously appears. And when he appears, we feel joy, we feel blissful. Even though we may have so many problems in this material world all around us, we experience that bliss. And it is because of the bliss that we like to engage in more activities of devotional service rather than engross ourselves in material activities. So this is something that was just before. This is setting the scene for Krishna to actually appear. And then it is said, just like fire appears from Aruni wood, just by account of mantras. So there's no matchbox. Right? So this Aruni wood is rubbed against each other and chanting some mantras. And it is not just the friction, unlike stones together. It is on account of the mantra recited properly that the fire inside the Aruni wood automatically manifests. So similarly, Krishna, by his own sweet will, manifested from Devaki. And it is said that when Krishna manifested, the jaws of Devaki and Vasudeva, they were just fell in amazement. They were like just dropped. Unbelievably beautiful. The dark rain cloud complexion and such effulgence of this child. And initially they couldn't just take their eyes off this child. It's only subsequent to their initial amazement that Vasudev saw that this child actually has 4 hands, and in the 4 hands this child was carrying the 4 symbols of Vishnu: the conch shell, the mace, the lotus, and the disc. And this wonderful soft feet, marks on his neck, the hair on his body, this beautiful description in this particular aspect. So when Vasudev saw this, he, with folded hands, kneeled down in reverence and instantly, mentally gave away 10,000 cows in charity. Because he knew that when we gain something, we should give something. This is another important lesson to learn. When we gain something, we should give something. Obviously, charity has to be done properly. We give something to the devotees to be used in the service of the Lord. So after he did that, Devaki began to relish Krishna through her eyes. And it almost became a festival for the eyes, which is also technically called Netra Utsav, Netrotsav. So she offered prayers, and then she had this communication with Krishna, not a spoken conversation, but a conversation from the eyes. Acharyas say that Devaki was expressing her concerns and Krishna was answering them just with his eyes. So the Acharyas say that Devaki was saying or was expressing her thoughts to Krishna with her eyes and saying with her eyes that you have killed the demon Madhu, but you might have killed the demon Madhu, but actually you should disappear from here before Kamsa sees you or comes to know that you have born. So Krishna, through his eyes, responds and says, but if I disappear from here, Kamsa will trouble you more, thinking that you have purposefully hidden me from him. And I don't want to do that. So she said, oh, don't worry, I'm not scared of Kamsa. All I want is that nobody should know that you have taken birth from me. And so you should leave, you should vanish from here. And Krishna says, but if I can kill the demon Madhu, why do you think I cannot kill Kamsa? And Devaki said, oh, no. Kamsa is way more powerful than the Madhu demon that you have killed before. Right? So, you understand, try to understand that, he's not an ordinary person. He's not like the demon Madhu. He's much more powerful, so you be careful. And by the way, will you withdraw your 4-handed form and assume a 2-handed form? And, display your normal form, so that Kamsa is not able to understand that he's Vishnu. You are Vishnu anyway. And then Krishna actually started saying that I'm so happy to be born as your child to fulfill your wishes and the benedictions that I had offered to you. So you were Sutapa and Prishni in your previous birth, and you performed a lot of austerities and wanted a child like me. But there was nobody like me, so I personally appeared as your child as Prishni Garma. Subsequent to that, I appeared as your child as Vamana when you were Aditi and Kashyap. And this is the 3rd time that I'm appearing as your child to fulfill your wishes. So, now take me to Vrindavan, replace me with the daughter of Nanda Maharaj, and once you bring her here, you will be happy. He told Vasudev. Vasudev was in shackles, hand and feet bound. He was in a prison cell that was heavily guarded, locked, guards all over the place. And now Krishna is telling him, you take me to Nanda Maharaj's place. How will Vasudev do that? We'll see next time, same day, same time, next week, and continue with perhaps the concluding part of Janmastami lessons from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.